Good morning, all. Welcome to our next session of our Lunchtime Live webinar series, which is put on and presented by the Texas Conference for Employers. Welcome. My name is Elsa Ramos. I'm one of the attorneys in the Office of Commissioner Demerson. Commissioner Aaron Demerson is a commissioner representing employers at the Texas Workforce Commission. For those of you that were not aware, prior to the pandemic, we used to host conferences across the state where in person we would share information about employment law and the resources available at Texas Workforce. And actually throughout the state and the country, there were some great federal resources that we also shared with you guys to help you manage your employees as an employer and help avoid some of the pitfalls of having employees and having your own business. So because of the pandemic, we can't go live. So here's our substitute, our Lunchtime Live series. So welcome again to the 5th of 7. On today's agenda, we are going to be having our labor market and career department giving us an update on the labor market. So that should be really interesting, kind of tell us where we are, and I think it goes back maybe a month or two, but kind of give us a view of where we are there. We'll then have a presentation from a representative of our shared work program. If you're not familiar with the shared work program, I think you'll find that as an employer who's wanting to maybe not have layoffs, it's a way of actually avoiding layoffs and keeping all of your employees employed and having unemployment benefits go to those employees in a way that will be more beneficial than if they were completely laid off and receiving unemployment benefits. So again, if you're not familiar with that, stay tuned. After that, I'm going to be speaking about managing employees that are working remotely, working from home, or teleworking, not working on site. We have a lot of questions about that, and unexpectedly, a lot of our businesses have had to pivot and go to that business model when they weren't planning on doing that. So we've got some tips for you employers regarding that. And finally, we're going to wrap up with Tommy Simmons, Senior Counsel in our office, who's going to be talking about Payroll Tax 101. Because that's really important and always relevant if you're an employer. Now, before we get started, a few housekeeping rules, just a few here. First of all, unlike our in-live conferences, our Lunchtime Lives do not offer any kind of continuing education credits or professional credits for, human resources professionals or CPAs. The information is here for you when you need it, but you don't get the credit. So hopefully that still works for you. We're not going to be taking any live questions during Lunchtime Live or afterwards, but we are going to be addressing the questions that were pre-submitted with your registration. So if you submitted a question, and even if you didn't, stay tuned if we don't run out of time. Most of those questions we're going to be addressing with our presentations, but those that we don't get to during our presentation, hopefully we can answer at the end, okay? Oh, and before I forget, all of the questions that have been submitted for Lunchtime Live are being compiled into an FAQ document. That's a living and breathing document, as we like to say, because every time we have one of these conferences, we add to the FAQ document, and that's available for you to review as well. This session is being recorded, okay, and should be, air quotes, should be available for future viewing. However, full disclosure, we are having some technical issues in getting these up on our website, so they will not be available immediately. But as soon as we work out our technical issues, are going to be on our website, all of the Lunchtime Live starting back in September. From there, the October ones, this one, the one in December, they'll all be available so you can view there. And speaking of December, our next Lunchtime Live is scheduled for the first Thursday in December. That's going to be December 3rd. So make sure and register if you're interested in that. And let me tell you what we're going to have on the agenda. On December 3rd, we're going to have workers' comp and COVID. Yeah, workers' comp, wondering how that fits and works with the COVID-19, with the coronavirus, COVID-19, make sure and join us. We're going to have a talk about civil rights. From our Civil Rights Department, and the Governor's Office of Economic Development and Tourism is also going to be with us. And finally, we're going to have an update from our office. And on December 17th will be our last one. So put that on your calendar. First and third Thursdays are Lunchtime Lives. And I think that does it for our housekeeping. So now, without further ado, let's get started with our first presentation. We're going to have Gabriel Guzman from our Labor Market and Career Information Department going to be talking to you. Mike manages the Dissemination and Outreach Unit within the Texas Workforce Commission's LMCI, Labor Market and Career Information Department. He and his co-workers are tasked with data estimation and public outreach for that department. Mike is from the Rio Grande Valley. Woohoo! I am too. He's a 2000 graduate of the University of Texas at Austin with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and started working LMCI after graduation. So good job, Mike. He also has experience with many of the Bureau of Labor Statistic programs, including the Occupational Employment Statistics, Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, Local Area Unemployment Statistics, and Current Employment Statistics program. Wow, great job, Mike. So without further ado, here is Mr. Guzman to give you the labor market update.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Today I'm going to give a labor market overview over Texas. Just want to also begin to say what Elsa was stating. This on the first slide, you'll notice it says October 2020. This actual update was given last month, and it represents September data. So by tomorrow, we're getting ready to release the October data. So that update will be coming soon. The Texas seasonally adjusted unemployment rate increased by 1.5 percentage points to 8.3% in September. The U.S. rate fell by 0.5 percentage point to 7.9% over the month. The Texas labor force participation rate for September decreased 0.8 percentage point to 63.6%. Just to also explain what the labor force participation rate is, it is basically the amount of people employed or looking for work as a percentage or as a proportion of the population 16 and over non-institutionalized. The Texas.
Hey, Mike.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, for some reason we're seeing the live picture in your and it's blocking the presentation.
Okay.
Sorry about the interruption.
I'm sorry. Let me see here.
All you need to do is go to the small screen and there's a minimize button at the top right of it. That's it.
Oh, sorry about that, everybody.
No problem.
Okay. The Texas employment to population ratio in September decreased 1.7 percentage point to 58.3%. The employment to population ratio is like the labor force participation rate. This one is basically made up of the employed as a proportion of the overall population 16 and over. Look at unemployment trends. The chart on the left is Texas versus U.S. civilian labor force over the year from September 2019 to September 2020. In September, the Texas seasonally adjusted civilian labor force rose 0.6% over the year and declined 1.2% over the month. As you can tell, that blue line there had that little peak and drop. The U.S. civilian labor force declined 2.4% over the year and 0.4% over the month. The little charts on the right there look at the metropolitan statistical areas, all 25 in Texas. This looks at the over the year change in aggregate terms. Blue means basically increasing, whereas the little orange means decreasing. So not seasonally adjusted, over half of the MSAs experienced increases to their civilian labor force. 3 of the 4 largest MSAs, that being Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio, experienced 5-digit increases in their labor forces. That is over 10,000 increase of 10,000 people. The Midland MSA experienced the largest drop over the year of 5,600. In terms of absolute values, most of the changes in the civilian labor force were between 5,500 and 8,000. That is the furthest most right chart. As you can see, the cluster of the dots towards the bottom, that just represents where most of the MSAs lie in terms of size. Looking at jobs, current employment statistics, after a revised over-the-month increase of 111,900 jobs in August, total non-farm employment grew at a slower pace in September with 40,700 jobs added. The private sector added 35,300 jobs after a gain of 81,500 positions in August. Overall, 8 of 11 major industries added jobs over the month. Since September 2019, Texas, however, shed 583,600 jobs, including 566,600 private sector jobs. Despite this, the Texas employment grew by 660,500 since April 2020. That V shape right there, you see the overall boomerang effect that, as jobs sprang back immediately after the shutdowns had ended. Year over year, employment losses occurred for all industries. This chart looks at Texas private sector versus government. Government is in the blue line. As you can tell, there's less volatility there. Government generally being more stable and not have been, profit driven, whereas the green line experienced a sharp drop there. The government sector's monthly growth has slowed from 2.2% in July down to 0.3% in September. Private sector employment has been positive for the last 5 months, from May to September, but has slowed overall during that time from 3.1% in May to 0.3% in September. The private sector added 35,300 jobs in September, while government added 5,400. State government added 17,100 jobs, while local government added 13,000. This is looking at some of the most notable major industries in September. On the left is trade, transportation, and utilities. Trade, transportation, and utilities has had 3 positive months and 2 negative months since April 2019. That is monthly changes, but overall has added 84,000 jobs during that time. That is from April to September. Retail trade has been the most positive, adding 85,600 since April, but wholesale trade has shed 12,500 jobs. Leisure and hospitality rebounded significantly in May and June, but has slowed since then. May and June seeing 331,400 jobs added, but 3 months since then have seen a total of just 3,100 jobs added. Most of the growth in this industry comes from accommodation and food services, which includes restaurants and hotels. This chart looks at the Texas versus U.S. Employment Index to pre-COVID peak, which was February 2020. So both Texas and the United States experienced total non-farm employment in February 2020. The U.S. had 152.5 million jobs, whereas Texas had 13 million. Texas and the United States saw steep employment declines through April, when Texas fell to about 89.2% of the February peak, while the U.S. fell to 85.5%. Since April, both have risen each month in total non-farm employment, with Texas reaching about 95.2% of its pre-COVID peak, while the U.S. at about 93%. So overall, it's a slow climb back. This chart looks at West Texas Intermediate crude and rig counts. While the monthly average for rig counts in Texas reached its lowest point in August of this year, there was a slight increase in September, the September average to 108 rigs. It's that blue line right there, that V shape, and then a little bit of a curve down towards the end. The monthly average for October is 122 active rigs, which is not on this chart yet, but will be updated soon. After reaching its lowest average monthly price over the last 10 years in April of 2020 at $16.55, the Cushing, Oklahoma, West Texas Intermediate monthly spot price reached $38.31 in June, so a little, almost a little over double, and has held at or above this monthly price through September. So definitely an improvement in the price of crude. Weekly and daily spot price also suggests this will hold true for October. This looks at the current population survey from the U.S. Census Bureau. This is the layoffs over time. As you can see, layoffs spiked in April with 1.3 million. The number of layoffs occurring during September 20 was actually down 22% from the previous month of August. So layoffs also are trending downwards. There was 311,900 layoffs in September, and this was the least number of layoffs over the month since peaking in April 2020. Waiters and waitresses continue to have the most cumulative layoffs since this time. As you can see the chart on the right, followed by cashiers, bus drivers, and retail salespersons. This looks at job postings. This is from a third-party source, Labor Insights Help Wanted Online. This is the job index, which increased 4.9 percentage points over the month. In September, there were 195,400 new job postings, seasonally adjusted. Weekly new postings have been above 47,000 for the last 2 weeks, compared to almost 45,000 for a year ago. So a little bit of an increase there, but it's definitely an improvement during the second week of October. These are also from the same source, the Help Wanted online. These are the most job postings by occupation. As you can see at the top, registered nurses continues to be the most advertised job online with just over 8,000, followed by sales representative, wholesale and manufacturing at 6,400, and retail salespeople at 6,200. Overall, the top three were in either sales and related with about 24,000 listings, followed by office and administrative support, clerical type positions at 21,000, and management type occupations with about 19,000. The top detailed industries, this also just looks at the same type of data, the job listings, but formulates or puts them together as far as a two-digit industry. Healthcare and social assistance had by far the most job listings from September through October with 31,000, followed by retail trade at 20,500, and accommodations and food services at just above 13,000. So overall, what does this mean? In September, Texas added jobs for the 5th consecutive month. Total non-farm employment grew after historic losses of 1.3 million jobs in April. Following those following that was two historic increases, averaging about 240,000 jobs each in April and May. Job growth has declined since then slightly. In September, Texas added 40,000 jobs over the month, 0.3%, just reviewing what I said earlier. This was down from 111,900 in August. Some industries are faring better than others. All major industries lost jobs over the year in percentage terms, but the financial activities was down 0.3%, government was down 0.9%, and professional business services was down 1.3%. So you can tell these were less affected by the downturn than the other major industries. This could be due to low interest rates, which hasn't slowed down housing demand, especially in this area, as well as the ability for these industries to allow for more telecommuting. Annually, Texas was doing better than most states in terms of job loss, in terms of percents. All states lost jobs over the year. Texas fared better with a decrease of 4.5% in employment and ranked 16th overall states annually. Hawaii was the worst with a decrease of 18.4%, while Idaho fared the best at 0.7%. Texas seasonally adjusted unemployment rate rose over the month by 1.5 percentage points. So after 4 months of decline, the unemployment rate rose to 8.3% in September. This followed a series high of 13.5% in April 2020. The civilian labor force fell by 171,800 people over the month, while the employed fell by 375,500, and the unemployed rose by 203,700. That being said, 1 month does not make a trend, and so we will release new data next month. Also, possible headwind, daily COVID cases are rising. According to the Texas Health and Human Service Commission, the 7-day average for new COVID cases has rose throughout October, reflecting a valley of daily cases of 1,300 for September 27 to about 6,400 on October 29. That being said, that is the labor market overview representing September data, and here's my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or call directly at 512-936-3202, and can definitely field any questions you have after contacting me.
Thank you, Mike. Great information, and it's great to hear that Texas has fared better than a lot of other states. So very happy to hear that information. Our next presentation is going to be about the shared work program at the Texas Workforce Commission, and our next speaker is going to be Ms. Angela Ford. Ms. Angela Ford is Manager over Shared Work and Federal Claims and Federal Program Coordinator for the state of Texas. She has been with the Texas Workforce Commission for 32 years, and all of those years, except for 5, where she worked in tax and employment services, she has been working in the unemployment insurance division. So if we have an expert on unemployment insurance and the different programs and things that we offer, it's going to be Ms. Ford. So Angela, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Elsa. Today, as you mentioned, I'm Angela Ford with the Shared Work Department. Today, I'm here to give you information about our Shared Work program here at the Texas Workforce Commission. The Texas Workforce Commission's TWC has developed the Shared Work program in 1985 to provide Texas employers with an alternative to layoffs. It is a voluntary program that helps Texas employers and employees withstand a slowdown in business. Shared Work has been used by employers during the COVID-19 pandemic to also bring back employees who were previously furloughed but not yet able to return to full-time work. To kind of give you an example of the trend with the program recently, the Shared Work has grown from an average of 120 to 200 employers participating in the past couple of years to we went to a high in 2020 of over 3,000 employers using the Shared Work program to help them through this pandemic. To kind of go over some details for a Shared Work plan, you can have multiple Shared Work plans within the organization if each plan covers 2 or more employees. As far as expiration, the Shared Work plan can be renewed when it expires. TWC will notify you that your Shared Work plan has expired and that you can renew the plan by submitting a new application. Our online application normally notifies you 30 days in advance. The flexibility of a Shared Work plan. The Shared Work plan can be implemented for 1 or more departments, shifts, or unit, and a unit has to consist of 2 or more employees. With the Shared Work program, you have the flexibility to specify the effective area of your organization. What about if you say you're returning to work full-time? You can return individuals or groups of employees to full-time work for 1 or 2 weeks, then resume the Shared Work plan. The Shared Work plan allows you the flexibility to stop or continue the plan as you need it. Plan modifications. You can lay off some of the workers in the original Shared Work plan and keep the remainder of the workers in the plan. The remaining employees must continue to meet the requirements for an approved plan. You can also replace an employee who leaves for personal reasons. So you do have the flexibility to change out employees if some of them happen to leave. Employers' eligibility requirements for a Shared Work plan. The percentage of reduced hours can differ for different individuals, as long as the reduction in normal weekly hours range from 10% to 40% each week, depending on your plan specifications. The range of hours worked may vary under Shared Work rules. TWC calculates benefits based on the number of reduced hours you specify as normal full-time employment. The figure may differ on various plan participants. For example, you may have some that work 10% reduction, some that have 20%, 25%, etc. The reduction in hours must apply to at least 10% of the employees in the affected unit. When submitting a Shared Work plan, you must describe how the employees will be notified in advance of the plan's initiation if possible. And normally during this COVID-19 period, a lot of time that was not possible to do. A Shared Work plan does not subsidize a seasonal employer during the off season. A Shared Work plan must be an alternative to layoffs, and you must provide an estimate of the number of employees who would be laid off if you do not participate in the Shared Work program. This rule, of course, does not apply if you use the program as a return to work option, which the Department of Labor has encouraged all states to make a part of their Shared Work program. If you currently provide fringe benefits, you must continue to provide these benefits for the employees in the Shared Work plan. Fringe benefits include health insurance, retirement benefits, paid vacation, holiday, sick leave, or other employee benefits. And employees participating in a Shared Work plan can still participate in training, such as employer-sponsored training or commission-approved training to help enhance their job skills. What about the employee's eligibility requirements? Share work unemployment benefits are payable to employees who qualify for and participate in an approved share work plan. Workers can choose not to participate in your plan. It is not mandatory for them. Employees who qualify will receive both wages and share work unemployment benefits. A share work plan is for employees whose hours have been reduced. Share work benefits can be paid only for wages lost because of reduction in the employee's regular hours. Regular hours cannot exceed 40 hours. An employee who normally works overtime may not receive share work benefits for reduction in their overtime hours. A question we get a lot is about salaried exempt employees. In order for a salaried exempt employee to participate in share work, their hours worked and salary must be reduced based on Fair Labor Standard Act guidelines. If you have any questions on these guidelines, please contact the U.S. Department of Labor, their Wage and Hour Division. After your share work application is approved, your employees will be required to submit their unemployment claim on our Unemployment Benefits Services portal. They must be eligible for regular unemployment benefits, and benefits eligibility for share work is calculated the same as regular unemployment. It is based on past earnings. TWC looks at the first 4 of the last 5 completed calendar quarters from the start date of their claim to determine eligibility. These wages have already been provided by your company or any other company they may have worked for in that 1-year period that I just mentioned. They must accept all hours offered by the participating employee, and they must be able and available to work any hours given to them by the employer. Now let's look at the employee unemployment benefits payment, what that entails. The percentage of reduction in the employee's work hours determine the amount of unemployment benefits a worker receives each week. If the worker's hours are reduced by 20%, and we kind of got a little flow chart here at the bottom that you can follow along with, the worker will receive 20% of their weekly benefit amount. And consider this scenario. An employee would be qualified to receive $400 in regular weekly benefits if they were fully unemployed as a result of a layoff. A company using share work cuts the employee's hours from 40 hours per week to down to 32 hours per week, which is a 20% reduction. To determine the amount of share work benefits the worker would receive, multiply the $400, which is their regular weekly benefit amount, by 0.20, that's the 20%, which would equal $80. The eligible worker would receive $80 in share work benefits each week, in addition to their regular wages for the 32 hours worked. Wanted to point out that this is just an example of one if someone was eligible for $400 in a weekly benefit amount. The weekly benefit amount in Texas can run from a maximum weekly benefit amount of $535 a week if you're fully unemployed to a minimum weekly benefit amount of $70 a week. Let's now discuss how to apply for a share work plan. You would log on to our Employer Benefit Services website to submit your share work plan online. Employer Benefit Services online is fast, it's easy, it's secure, and it is available 24/7. To complete your share work plan application, you will need to know the company's name or provide the company's name, address, telephone number, fax number, and the contact person for the contact information for the authorized representative with signature authority. It will ask you for your TWC tax account number. If you are part of a union as part of your company, or you are a union regulation, has some kind of regulations with your company, that union representative must sign off on the plan because they have to know that your employees will be having their hours reduced. If you do not have a union involved with your company, then that would not be needed. The names and social security numbers of all participating employees that you want to enroll in the plan. Again, they do not have to participate, but you will have to put their name down if you feel their hours will be reduced. You can either upload a CSV, which is a common separated values file with all the employees' data, or you can enter the data manually. Most employers who have a large amount of employees participating normally do the upload. Smaller employers usually do it one by one. Once the file is uploaded, you can edit your list or add or delete participants as needed. TWC approves or denies a plan within 10 days of receipt. The effective date of the plan is the date TWC approves it. After TWC approval, the shared work plan is effective for 1 year. That's 12 full calendar months. When TWC approves a shared work plan, we send you an email notifying you of the status of your application with instructions on the next step. We will also provide you with a direct shared work contact person and their phone number, and we will also give you your user guide to how to use employer benefit services to actually start reporting your reduced hours. If TWC denies a shared work plan, we will notify you in writing and provide the reason for denial. Next thing we're going to talk about is how exactly do you report the hours. You will go back to employer benefit services either weekly or bi-weekly to file the reduced hours. What you will be doing is certifying the number of reduced hours offered and worked each week within the 10 to 40% shared work range for each participating employee. You must report any paid time off and give information on any hours that the employee may have refused to work that was offered to them. Want to stress that employees do not file their own payment request when on the shared work program. That is done strictly by the employer. Now, there could be times where the shared work range, if the person is a full-time 40-hour-a-week person, the shared work range for the 10 to 40% would be 24 to 36 hours, which means they must work between 24 to 36 hours. But there could come a time where you will fall either under that 24 hours or over the 36. Our process will allow you to still submit that employee, but you must include their gross earnings for that week, because if they're outside of the shared work range of 24 to 36 hours or 10 to 40%, and we're talking about a 40-hour work person, they are not being compensated by the shared work programming. They are now on regular unemployment, and regular unemployment for partial unemployment requires you not only to report the hours worked, but also your gross wages. TWC will determine if anyone falls outside this range, if they can be paid using regular unemployment guidelines, and then if they can, TWC will pay them. If they're unable to due to their wages, TWC will send them a statement of account that lets them know that. Keep in mind, shared work only looks at the percentage of reduced hours, so when you are within the shared work range, you are not required to give us any gross wages. I will now answer some questions that were sent in as employers registered for this conference. One of the questions was, how does this impact employees when they exhaust their UI benefits? Are companies notified, and do we remove them from the plan? If a person on shared work exhausts their UI benefits that they were given based on the state program, there is currently a federal extension that they will be set up for. But I do want to stress that that extension is due to expire at the end of this year. They can be left on your plan while on the federal extension. Your shared work certification report that you will have as part of your employer benefit services shared work access does inform you when an employee has exhausted state UI funds. Next to their name, it will state exhausted funds. Next question, Guy, was shared work versus partial unemployment. What is the pros and cons for commission employees? I really don't know if there are any pros and cons for that, but I can state that if a commission employee has set regular hours and those hours have been reduced, which affects their earning potential, they can be part of your shared work program. Shared work is not based on the amount of wages earned during the week if they work between the 10 to 40% shared work reduction hour range. If they do not have set hours, they would have to file for regular reduced hours unemployment on their own and report their hours worked and their commissions made each week, because commissions are reported when earned. Next question I got was, if you did not receive a response to an application for the shared work program, how can you follow up to request an update? We respond to all applications within 10 business days. So if you haven't got an update and it's been more than 10 business days, please email us at UI Shared Work for us to look into that. Even if you apply and give us a future date, We send out an acknowledgement of the receipt of your application. Your application cannot be approved until the week you start working reduced hours. Keep in mind, shared work is an unemployment program and is not set up until your employees are experiencing some type of unemployment. We urge you to apply as far in advance as you can when you are anticipating having reduced hours. But if you submit an application, say for today, and you're not expecting to have reduced hours to January, we will not be approving your plan to January, but we will send you acknowledgement that it has been received and reviewed. The next thing is how our shared work program participants erroneously received a work search notification from TWC. Do shared work participants have to comply with the notice of work search requirements? That work search notification letter was sent out in error. Our agency is working on sending a correction. Until the corrections are sent, employees can always go to our website where it indicates, if they want confirmation, because it indicates there that a shared work claimant does not have to look or register for work. This is not a condition due to COVID-19. This is a rule anytime someone is on the shared work program. And again, I thank you for asking me to come and talk about the shared work program, and I will turn it back over to Elsa.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate your work on this and answering those questions for us, because that is one question that we had been getting a lot lately about letters going out with participants in the shared work program who were now, being told they needed to search for work. So now that it's my turn, I'm up next on the agenda. I'm going to be sharing my screen and then getting ready.
Angela, if you could unshare your screen, please.
And I guess, because we're live, folks. Okay, I think we're getting ready there. And let me share my screen. Are we good? Can you see my presentation? Here we go. That was the end.
Here we go, Elsa.
Can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
And let me minimize, and you can hear me. Awesome. So this is me. I am one of the attorneys in Commissioner Demerson's office. There are 4 of us in the legal staff who help employers as they manage their businesses and employees, and we help provide information and guidance to employers and education sometimes also added there. My topic today is managing employees working remotely. We set this topic up months ago for this week on our Lunchtime Live series. Coincidentally, though, on Monday, the American Enterprise Institute, which happens to be a think tank with a lot of people coming up with, looking at issues and solutions for workplace, it seems like the American Enterprise Institute basically released a report called The Trade-Offs of Remote Work. And so I read that report because, again, I'm going to be presenting on this topic today. And I got some interesting statistics and numbers that I'm going to be sharing with you. So, but before we get there, I just want to clarify some terms here. Working from home, working from anywhere, which is a term I just learned thanks to that report from the American Enterprise Institute. There are some jobs that provide the option for employees to work from anywhere. So you could be sitting in Bali, I suppose, as long as you're getting your work done remotely, and you could be working for the company in Texas, for example. Teleworking, remote working, distance working, telecommuting. When I use these terms, I'm talking about the same thing. There may be some differences if you go in Google or go on the internet to say what's the difference between teleworking versus remote working. Is one virtual, one's not, I'm just off site. But when I'm talking about it, basically talking about not working on site, working somewhere else, and basically having to use technology, to communicate and get that work done. So it turns out that according to this new report, there are a lot of employer benefits and challenges with remote work. Prior to the pandemic, apparently the numbers were that about 7% of the workforce in the United States, 7% of the workforce was working from home or remotely working. After the pandemic, where again, like I said earlier, a lot of us governmental agencies as well, had to pivot to a different model. About the studies say 33 to 50% now of the workforce is working remotely. So because of that, that's why we're looking at some of these. So here are some of the trade-offs of remote work for employers. We have positive and negative trade-offs. We're not going to talk about all of them. We don't have that much time, but I do want to talk about, for example, the operational cost savings right there in the positive trade-offs for the employers. It looks like, real estate, your rent, or if you're owning your building or your space where you're, performing your work as an employer, the real estate cost very much decreases if you don't have your employees working on site. And the number that they have is that employers are able to save about $11,000 per employee per year on having the employees working remotely, not working on site. This includes not just like the rent or, the amount of money for the space itself, but also the incidental costs, like the utilities, water, that kind of thing. Also, one of the numbers that they looked at is that the employer saves money as well because you have lower turnover. Surprise! Employees who have the option of working from home, either part of the week, or at, their discretion, or the whole week, depending on whether they're able to do that, those employees value, I guess is the word I'm going to use, value that job more and are less likely to leave it because it does lead to greater satisfaction in the job. So if you don't have as much turnover, you as the employer don't have to then spend money on recruiting and spend money on retraining and on HR resources to get those employees back to where you need them. Also, interesting thing that I hadn't considered is that because employees do seem to value the ability to work from home, many employees, according to this report, may be willing to accept lower wages as long as they have that option, because either they're going to save money by not having to commute or, wardrobe or incidental things like meals. So the employee is saving money because they can also then perhaps live somewhere where it's cheaper or less costly for them to live. So something to consider as you're an employer. I know right now, most of us who are having employees working from home had to do this without a plan and not really at our option as employers. But if you think about it, moving forward, it might be something to consider from the employer perspective. What about the employee? There are also trade-offs, negative and positive, for employees who are working remotely. And I want to just focus on a couple of them. Like I said, greater job and life satisfaction. I think that those studies have been around for a while and those numbers are not surprising. The individual cost savings, like I said, if you don't have to commute, if you don't have to invest in the gas and the maintenance of your vehicle or other commuting costs and your professional wardrobe, if you are in the professional field, and meals and those other things, you're going to be saving, according to this report, from $2,000 to $6,500 per year if you're an employee that's now having the option to work remotely. So that is substantial. The increased physical well-being and healthier habits, you get more sleep, which leads to happier and healthier. I was making up a word there. Happier and healthier employees. From what I was reading, the larger commutes, the longer commutes take a toll on employees. There are stress-related disorders that are tied to the longer commutes, and the report actually also states that there's been evidence that long commutes shorten your lifespan. So as an employee, again, that's a great trade-off. As you see the last one, working in jammies with access to a refrigerator and snack trade-off, that source is not the report. That was just me, because that's been one of the things that I've seen since I too, after the pandemic, am working off-site and remotely. I can tell you that I do appreciate not having to commute. I had a long commute and being able to some days work in my jammies and have the quick trips to the refrigerator. So, moving along. Let's get to then the real nuts and bolts of why you're probably tuned in to find out, how do I manage my employees in real life? It's great that the statistics say, employees love it and some employers love it because they save money, but we didn't choose it. In this pandemic, now we're forced to do this business model that we had no intention of doing. So we're going to cover some operational, practical, and policy matters on how to handle some of these issues. Right off the bat, tools and equipment. Who is responsible for providing the work tools? At your on-site location, pretty much, the employer is responsible for providing most of the tools and equipment. Not surprising. So now that employees have to work remotely, and we know, I understand a lot of jobs cannot be done remotely, but for those that can the employer require the employees working from home to provide their own computer and internet service? Can they? Well, I'm not aware of any law that prohibits it. So I guess the short answer is going to be yes. However, employers, beware. You might find yourself up against some minimum wage issues. The Fair Labor Standards Act requires your hourly employees to be paid at least minimum wage for every hour that they work. And if you require your employees to provide their computer, a work phone, or internet service, and they're making close to minimum wage, them having to take that out of their pocket to be able to work for you may actually end up taking them below minimum wage, which would be a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that's something to consider. If you have a highly paid individual and they already had a computer and their internet service is already set up, they may not be experiencing any extra cost, but beware of the minimum wage issues for your hourly employees that are at or close to minimum wage if you're expecting them to provide equipment. What about control over the equipment? It's very easy when you provide the computer or the cell phone or whatever other equipment you need to say, hey, bring it back in. We need it back at the office. Or if there's a job separation, give us back the equipment. Or if you want to install certain software, right? It's so much easier on your equipment than you asking me on my personal computer to install certain software. So that's one of the benefits of the employer providing the equipment. I understand it's a cost that you maybe hadn't considered because you weren't planning on it, but there are some benefits to the employer. There are some benefits to that cost. Repairs and maintenance. If my computer's several years old and goes down and I can't perform my work, who's going to be repairing it? Who's going to make sure I'm up and running? Again, when it's yours, you employer are responsible and can take care of that. If it's me, I may have some slowdowns in repairing that equipment and getting back to work. Ownership of work product or information. This is fun. So if you give me the equipment, then my work product, the work emails, all of that stuff, perhaps a client list, customer information is on that equipment. If it's my computer and I'm using my equipment to get the work done, so now I have client lists and I'm dealing with customer information and I have my work on it. So we're back to the control. As you can see, I have control as the employee. You may not have the same control. And that might create an issue. Now, I'm not saying that every employer has this issue, just bringing these up so that you're aware there are things to think about that you may not have thought of that. And again, just beware, the Department of Labor is not really keen on the employer passing the cost of doing business down to the employees. So if you're able to, it's a good idea, in my opinion. It's a best practice if the employer were the one to provide the equipment and the tools necessary for your work at home employees to do their job. Time tracking. How much time is spent working? A lot of the questions that we got pre-submitted during registration had to do with this issue. How do I manage my employees when they're hourly employees? How do I keep track of the time? How do I make sure that they're working? So can an employer require employees working from home to clock in and out? Absolutely. Okay, that's a yes. You have different types of employees. Salaried employees, and here I'm talking about salaried exempt employees, are easy because if they truly meet the definition of a salaried exempt employee under the Fair Labor Standards Act, then you don't have to track their time because they're going to get paid the same regardless of the quantity or quality of work, but you can track their time and you're allowed to ask them to do that. Your hourly employees, you're responsible as the employer to track their hours. You want to be in the position to have the best information of the time that they work because it allows you to help pay them correctly and also takes away any future unnecessary claims for overtime or other things. So you want to have the best record of their hours. I have seen some employers say, well, since they're working remotely and it's so hard to keep track of their hours, can I just make them salaried? And the answer is yes, you can make your hourly employees salaried, but they're not exempt from overtime. So just because you make them salaried doesn't mean that you don't have to pay them overtime. You still want to keep track of their hours because if they're not exempt from overtime based on the amount of money that they get and the job duties that they have, you're still responsible employer for overtime. Here's some methods of being able to track employee time when they're working remotely, like an online time clock, right? They log in on their computer and clock in. Some phone apps are out there too. where your employees then use their phone, company phone or personal cell phone, and are able to clock in and out. Calling into a manager, hey Bob, I'm getting started at 8:02 in the morning, right? Emailing the manager, hey, I'm here, I'm getting started. A lot of employers have resorted to surveillance software. And by this, I'm talking about, tracking keystrokes on a computer, tracking, histories, or also using webcams, right? So from there, we have this question, which also sort of came in the pre-registration. Can employer require employees working from home to be on the webcam for meetings? No law prohibits that. Okay, so I'm going to go with yes. You can require, if your employee's computer or phone have a camera on them, that they can be on the cam during a meeting. You can require. Can you require that they be on the camera all day so you can see what they're doing, right? If they're in front of a computer. I'm not aware of any law that prohibits that, but there's going to be, some things to consider. But I guess the short answer to that question is yes, you can require that as the employer, make it a condition of employment. Here are some additional methods that might help you track time for your employees. You can institute some policies or rules that say, hey, if I send you an email, I need a response within 20 minutes. Because I feel as though a lot of employers feel now that the employees are working from home, they're goofing off all day. They're watching movies all day. They're on social media all day, and they're not really working. They could be taking care of their kids, their pets, a family member. We all have these responsibilities at home that we don't have to deal with when we're working on site. But now that we're working at home, like I said, a lot of employers have fears that maybe they're paying for work that's not getting done, or paying for hours when work is not getting done. So again, the quick email response, I like that. Establish a time period for returning calls. Hey, I left you a message. When I leave you a message, I expect a call back within 10 minutes, or again, whatever makes sense for you. Scheduling video conferences throughout the day. We recently had an unemployment claim where the employer fired the claimant. The employee that ended up filing a claim fired the claimant because in one of the conferences, they noticed by looking at the background that the employee was in her car. So now the employer is thinking, hey, she's not at home in front of, the equipment that she needs to do her job. So they fired her for that. Turns out the claimant had a really good reason, and the employer ended up losing that claim. But again, you can schedule conferences throughout the day to ensure yourself that your employees are working when they say that they are. Again, beware of unexpected overtime claims. It's one thing for you as the employer to say, hey, we want to keep track of your hours. It's another thing for the employee to say, great, I'm keeping track of my hours so well, and it turns out that because I'm working from home, I'm working extra. A lot of employees actually work more when they're at home. So if your hourly employees are working more than their 40 hours a week, you're going to have to pay that overtime. So if you want to avoid that, make sure you have clear policies about work schedules and unauthorized overtime, because you as the employer need to enforce those. You want to get the work done, but you want to get it done during the period of time that you set out. So clear schedules and clear policies about that. Let's shift to quality control. And by this, I mean, what's the quality of the work product? Is the work getting done to the level that you want during these hours? According to that report that I just read on Monday, without what they call, I guess, face-to-face time or faces on time or something like that, basically without seeing your employees, a lot of employers worry, again, about the time work that they need to pay for and also the quality of the work, and is the work getting done? So the employers are resorting many times to two methods of dealing with this: micromanaging and surveillance. Does that sound like any of you out there? Okay, like I said, employers are very worried about these issues. So micromanaging and surveillance. So can an employer require employees working from home to submit proof of daily work? Because you want to know what I've been up to all day. Absolutely. The answer is yes. You can require a report daily or weekly, like I said, or you can schedule conferences throughout the day or calls throughout the day. You can ask for regular reports of progress on what I'm doing. You can ask how many phone calls I've done. You can ask, for a log of the people that I've talked to. You can track computer usage, right? We talked about that. There's surveillance software out there for tracking either the keystrokes or tracking the sites that I've gone to or how much time I've spent on the computer or in the right programs. Little asterisk, who owns the equipment? Because we're back to, can you force me to download software, use certain software like surveillance software on my own equipment? You can require me to do that, but what if I don't want to? Why? Because there are privacy concerns attached to this, which is why it's better for the employer to provide the equipment. Okay, now think about it yourself as you're an employee and you may be a business owner, but think about this, right? Somebody else says, hey, install this software on your computer or your phone. Now I, as the employer, am going to be able to track your keystrokes, what websites you've been to, your search history. There are some of you out there who don't want to be sharing your search history, right? You know who you are. Neither do your employees, right? You're going to be able to see a lot more than you need to for the work. So beware of the surveillance tracking when it's not on the employer equipment. If it's on the employer equipment, you can have rules. The equipment that we provide for you is for work only, and you have no expectation of privacy on this, so make sure you use it for work only. Now, the surveillance equipment may help you make sure your employees are doing what they're supposed to when they're supposed to, but one of the trade-offs also in the report is the eroding of employee trust. You know, a lot of us employees are hardworking, best-intentioned, loyal employees. And when the employer starts acting as though they don't trust us, that creates some friction there and may make some of your employees start wanting to look for work somewhere else. Also, be consistent with your enforcement of your deadlines. If you're going to require reports or again, or the work product, and you're requiring it of everyone, but you're really only enforcing it on some people because there's some people perhaps you trust more. It's like, oh, I know Elsa's doing her work, so I'm just going to go, you know, but I need to check with Susan all the time because she's not, you know. Be consistent, but do what works for you. I think you're going to hear one of the things I'm going to keep talking about is you really should have a plan. Most employers, because of the pandemic, were unable to come up with a plan before having to switch to remote work. But as you see what works and doesn't work and maybe pick up some pointers, start thinking about how you might make your work from home model better or how you can make improvements on that. Security concerns. Okay, we're talking about here about keeping your employer information secure and your customer information secure as well. Employers, this is your responsibility. If you're compiling information regarding your customers or your sales or your financial information or financial information of your customers, that is your responsibility to maintain safe. Us at the Texas Workforce Commission have a lot of personally identifying information, names and social security numbers, dates of birth, financial information, and we're tasked with maintaining the security of that information. You as the employer need to maintain the security of your own information and your customers' information. This can get tricky if you have people working from home and digitally, you know, we have this information. So back to when you provide the tools and equipment, it is so much easier for you to safeguard that information. You might consider also using a secure internet, VPN. I'm not the technical person, but I'm told this is secure, basically a secure highway for information as you're passing information back and forth that could be sensitive between coworkers. You're also going to probably want to spend some time on training on policies regarding maintaining the safety and security of the information, whether it belongs to the employer or whether it belongs to your customers. It's really important, again, because you're responsible for this. Beware, right? Here's my little scary slide. Employer beware. If I am storing confidential information in my equipment, then if my equipment is not so secure, or if my computer gets hacked, or if my computer gets stolen and I don't have a password, what's going to happen? Back to employer, you're responsible for safeguarding. So make sure you have a plan for being able to safeguard that or institute policies. What about at home? I have a computer, I have family members. So you have non-employees or friends of family members who have access, you know, to that computer. Think about that. You want to have policies in place, even from the work from home, to make sure that non-employees don't end up with access to information they shouldn't have. Again, if it's my personal computer, and I want to take it to a coffee shop somewhere, or I'm traveling for a holiday, I'm taking it with me, am I also taking the information that needs to be kept secure? Something to consider as well, because this is something that, again, could get stolen, could get lost, could be accessed by someone who's not an employee, and we don't necessarily want that to happen. What about emailing confidential information? So back to that secure highway. If you're going to be emailing names, dates of birth, social security numbers, financial information of customers, medical information of your patients, and it's emailed back and forth, is that secure? Have a plan. Figure out what you need to do to secure that if this is something that you deal with on a daily basis. Injuries on the job. Okay, on site, most employers have workers' comp in Texas. So here's a question. Can an employer be responsible for an employee getting injured while working from home? And you're thinking, well, that's ridiculous. But the answer is the employer may be responsible if an employee gets injured while working from home. So as I was saying, workers' compensation, if you're not aware, most employers are, is basically an insurance plan that protects employees who have injuries by paying for medical and lost wages, who have injuries during course and scope of employment. Also, it protects employers from lawsuits for these injuries. So for injuries that are covered by workers' comp, it doesn't matter whose fault the injury was. Maybe I was negligent when I didn't wear the back brace or the back belt, or didn't, hook on the scaffolding with my security line when I should have. Maybe the employer was negligent because they didn't provide the safety equipment that I needed, or they didn't follow OSHA guidelines. Under workers' comp, it doesn't matter whose negligence caused the injury. The worker's going to get medical and lost wages covered, and the employer's not going to be sued. Okay. If you have workers' comp, employees working at home are covered if they have an injury during the course and scope of employment. You're like, well, how do we prove that? They're working from home. I don't have eyes on them. We don't have witnesses. I'm not saying it's easy. It definitely is tough, but workers' comp, if there's an injury, it's a really good idea to just call it into workers' comp, right? So what can you do? You can set guidelines for the designated workspace at home. The employer may or may not follow them, but at least say, hey, if you're working from home, could you please have these guidelines? Not recommending any in particular. Again, what works for you and the space where your employer is working can be very different, but you might want to go to the Texas Department of Insurance, TDI, because they're the ones who handle workers' comp claims, and they have training materials and really good information on safe workplaces. So I would recommend going to them and coming up with some rules or guidelines, or recommendations on making sure that wherever your employees are working can be as safe as they can be, even remotely. Now beware, again, that's all fine and good if you have workers' comp. If you happen to be an employer without workers' comp, because Texas is the one state out of 50 that does not require employers to have workers' comp. If you don't have workers' comp, you can face a lawsuit for a personal injury. Okay, I don't want to scare you, I just want you to be aware of that. But if the employee would have to prove that the employer's negligence caused the injury. But again, it's so much harder when you don't have coworkers and witnesses, or just cameras of the workplace to be able to prove how an accident happened. So think about it, have a plan, figure out what's going to work for you so that you're not blindsided by something like this. Job separations, getting close to the end here. So I like to say it's not over till it's over. So you have a remote employee who's working from home, and either you fire that employee or that employee quits. There's some issues just to be aware of. Back to return of the equipment. If it's my equipment, not a problem. I just get to keep my stuff. But if it's your equipment, you're going to want it back, right? You invested in that computer, the telephone, the printer, the monitors, whatever else that you provided for me to work from home, the desk space, the chairs, whatever it is, you're going to want it back. So you're going to want to plan on how that's going to happen so that you manage expectations. What if an employee does not return the equipment? Like, nope, keeping that iPad. Or the employee says, I lost it. I had it yesterday, but I don't anymore. The employer inevitably is going to reach out to us and say, look, can I just take the cost of the laptop or that iPad or tablet from their last paycheck? The answer is, I'm going to answer like Tommy does, our senior counsel. Yes, you can if, and then I'm going to answer like I do. No, you can't unless. Same answer, but a little bit different because I don't want you to stop listening after Tommy says, yes, you can. Okay. Can you deduct the cost of that tablet from their last paycheck? No, unless you have the employee's authorization to deduct from that check in writing. Okay, so under Texas payday law, you need the authorization of the employee in writing. But remember, you still cannot take the employee who's hourly below minimum wage. And if you have a salaried employee, you may not be able to take them below that salary. So have a plan. Work out what works for you. Make sure your employees are aware of it. What about recovering information final work? I've talked to employers who are calling us because they say, look, my employee has our client list. They took the hard copy of this notebook of the client list. Or now with the equipment, if you have everything on the hardware, on the computer or the phone or the tablet that the employee has, it's going to be harder for you if the employee doesn't want to return that. So recommendation, again, do what works for you, but if you're able to make sure that the proprietary information or confidential information is not actually on the hardware, but maybe linked, where the employee has to go on a link to read that information and can't store it, or it's not accessible to be copied onto their equipment, I would recommend something like that. Unemployment claims after the job separation. I've just told you that there are a lot of things that the employer can require that are not prohibited by law. So let's say that I'm using my equipment. I'm not at minimum wage. That's not an issue for you. And you've asked me, hey, also you have a computer, you have a phone. Can you just use your stuff? Like, sure, not a problem. Let's get the work done. And then you want me to put in some surveillance software. So you can track my keystrokes, my history, how much time I might be spending on social media throughout the day, what movies I'm watching on Netflix, okay? And I say, no, I don't want to do that. Can you require that as a condition of employment? Elsa, work computer, you need to install the software. Yes, you can. You can make that a condition of my employment. And if I refuse, you may end up firing me. But please note that that may not have you win the unemployment claim. In order for the employer to win an unemployment claim, if you fire me, you're going to have to prove misconduct connected with the work, which means you have to prove you fired me for a reason, like not following instructions in my power to control. But you also have to show that the employer's request is reasonable. So just a straight blanket, install this, surveillance software on your computer, or you'll be fired, may not be reasonable. It depends on the circumstances. So I just want you to know that just because you can do it or you can require it of your employees doesn't mean you're going to win the unemployment claim if the employee doesn't do what you're asking them to do. Case by case basis, but the request from the employer needs to be reasonable. So what are the takeaways? There is a lot to cover and I barely touched on it, but I didn't have that much time today, okay? Takeaways, have a plan, make a plan. Not every employer's plan on remote working is going to work for every business out there. You need to figure out what works for you and your employees. And you've had a period of time right now where you probably figured out that works, that doesn't work. Okay, have a plan, make a plan. Make sure you have clear policies about schedules, about overtime, because remember, minimum wage and overtime. Make sure you have clear policies and enforce those policies. And about, I want you to return emails. I want you to call me back. I want you to submit reports weekly. I want to see a progress report on a shared document. Add to it every day so we can all take a look at it. Whatever plan works for you, implement that. But again, remember, if you're asking employees to provide their own equipment or internet service or, whatever tools they need to do their job, remember that your employees need to make at least minimum wage for every hour that they work. And they need to get paid for overtime for any hours over 40. Finally, I'm going to end with this. When you have employees working from home, it's not as easy to communicate. You don't have that face-to-face time. You don't all get together at a meeting very quickly. So communication with employees is key. So whatever way that the employer can do that and maintain communication with the employees, is going to be really important because you want to maintain your work culture. Highly engaged employees are happier employees, longer term employees. And by us having to work remotely, we've seen it ourselves in our team. You know, we used to be together all the time and travel all the time, and we like each other. So we enjoyed sharing each other's lives and finding out, you know, what was going on with people. Now it's a lot harder. You don't see happy people down the hall. You don't find out something happened or they had a birthday. So that does take away from your work culture. And then some employees do feel very isolated, and that leads to loss of effectiveness, unhealthier employees, unhappier employees, less engaged employees. So you employers are tasked with the responsibility really of trying to maintain your work culture to get that work done. So communicate with your employees, ask for feedback, take suggestions. I can tell you that in our office, every Thursday we get together over a Zoom meeting because we are working remotely to do something fun for a short period of time. We have that today. So we get together at least once a week, and it's voluntary. And again, it's just to kind of reconnect and see our faces again and remember why we work together and enjoy working together. So with that, I'm going to be wrapping it up, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that then I can introduce our next speaker. Go here. I'm hopefully have stopped sharing my screen. So up next is Tommy Simmons. Like I said, he's our senior counsel at the Office of the Commissioner representing employers. And if you have been an employer in Texas for any length of time and had any dealings with the Texas Workforce Commission, or have attended any conference, or are familiar with the Especially for Texas Employer Guidebook, you've been touched by Tommy in some form or fashion. He is incredibly knowledgeable and the head of our legal team, and he is going to be giving you some great information right now on Payroll Tax 101. Go ahead, Tommy.
There we go. Can everybody see my screen? I hope. It looks like it. So just a minute. I want to make sure that I'm sharing my screen. Yes. All right. So this is my subject for today. We're going to talk about tax. Unfortunately, you can't do anything in state government without talking about tax. And my contact information is up here. People should, definitely contact Commissioner Demerson's office if they have any questions at all regarding any of these employment law topics that you see today, or any of them that are on the book or on our website. We welcome all of those questions. The employer info email address is in the middle of the page down at the bottom. And I would encourage y'all to look at the electronic version of our book, which is the second web address down at the bottom. Now, let me quickly say a nice word for a wonderful service of a sister agency, the Texas Department of Insurance. It's the OSHCON program, and it's the Occupational Safety and Health Consultation Program. It's a free service, and it's basically workplace safety experts who are available to consult with you and your business about workplace health and safety issues. And it can be wonderful preparation just for keeping the workplace safe and injury-free, but also to help you be in compliance with OSHA guidelines. So, and having gone through an OSHCON consultation may actually help you in case any violations are found by Department of Labor OSHA representatives. So give that a try. Now, regarding payroll taxes, there are federal and Texas payroll taxes. They are owed on wages, compensation given to employees in return for personal services rendered. On the federal side, there is withholding tax, there's FICA and Medicare tax, and federal unemployment tax. In Texas, the only payroll tax is the state unemployment tax, which is administered by this agency, the Texas Workforce Commission. Now, real quickly, before we get into the tall weeds on payroll taxes, Something that will make it much easier to deal with payroll taxes will be if you get a W-4 properly submitted from an employee, and that means filled out properly and signed by the employee. That gives you the basic information you need to report wages and pay various federal and Texas payroll taxes. It's a good idea to not let anybody perform any work until they have submitted the W-4 form. So just make sure that you get that before anybody performs any work at all. The federal payroll taxes, of course, are administered by the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. And this is not a seminar on the technical requirements of federal payroll taxes. All I can do as a non-IRS person is refer you to the most recommended publications from the IRS regarding payroll taxes, and that would be these three publications that you see on this slide. Publication 15, which is the basic withholding tables and other information. Also publication 15A, which talks about supplemental payroll tax information and exemptions from payroll tax. And then 15B, which handles taxation of fringe benefits. All three are good to have. All three are free downloads from the IRS website at those addresses shown. In order to get assistance from the IRS with federal payroll taxes, you can call them using the local office directory at that web address that is in the first item. If you want to call the National IRS office, their number is at the web address that is shown in the second item. Although there is a caution on that website that because of the volume of calls, it can take quite some time for a representative of the National IRS office to answer the phone. You might have better luck calling your local IRS office, and there are a number of them scattered throughout the state of Texas. An alternative, if you have a CPA already or a good payroll accounting software program, or you've got a bookkeeper knowledgeable about payroll taxes, they can help you comply with the federal payroll tax requirements. And so that might be a good alternative to waiting to talk with an IRS representative. The federal unemployment tax is directly related to what we do here at the agency because as it turns out, all of the administrative costs of running the state unemployment insurance program, that's everything that the TWC does about unemployment claims and appeals, all of that is paid for with federal unemployment taxes that employers send to the IRS. And the federal unemployment tax rate is 6%. That's applied to the first $7,000 of an employee's wages in a calendar year. But wait, if you are in a state that has a federal law compliant system like Texas does, you get a 90% discount on that federal unemployment tax rate. So because you are in Texas and because Texas has a federally compliant unemployment insurance system, your unemployment tax on the federal side is 0.6%. So on the first $7,000 of an employee's wages in a calendar year, that would be $42 per employee per year, which is not bad in terms of tax load. Concerning the state unemployment tax, that's where the rubber really meets the road for the Texas Workforce Commission. We administer that. We administer the only payroll tax that is on a state level in Texas. There's no income tax. There's no other type of tax on wages in Texas other than the state unemployment tax. It's paid by employers. This is not something that you would take or deduct from an employee's wages. The state unemployment tax is based on your company's unemployment insurance claim experience. As far as the tax rates are concerned, for new employers who are in their first 6 calendar quarters of operation, your rate is 2.70%. And so you'll simply pay that on the first $9,000 of each employee's earnings. Under state law, the taxable wage base for the state unemployment tax is $9,000. So 2.70% of 9,000 is $243. That's $243 per employee per year for a new employer in your first year and a half of operation. Once you pass that point, then you're eligible for a calculated tax rate. So if you have been in operation for at least 1.5 quarters and you've had no chargebacks, then you'll get the minimum tax rate, which is equal to the replenishment tax plus the 0.1% ETIA rate. Employers who have chargebacks during the past 3 years will have a calculated tax rate based on the claims that they've had and their taxable wages during a certain period. That period is 3 years. And here is the an outline of the tax rate formula. The central figure, the central component of the state unemployment tax in Texas is the benefit ratio. The benefit ratio equals your chargebacks over the past 3 years divided by your taxable wages paid to all employees over that same 3-year period. Now, if you have a higher chargeback total, you're going to have a higher benefit ratio and a higher unemployment tax rate. If you have lower chargebacks, you'll have a lower benefit ratio and lower unemployment tax rates. The kicker here is that it helps to have a higher 3-year taxable wage total, but the only wages that can go into that 3-year taxable wage total are the wages that you have properly reported and paid unemployment taxes on. So that's an incentive to pay the unemployment taxes properly. Once the benefit ratio is calculated, then it's multiplied by a factor known as the replenishment ratio to get the general tax rate. Now, the general tax rate may have some adjustments to it. That would be the replenishment tax, the deficit tax if there's a deficit in the state unemployment trust fund, a surplus credit if there is a surplus that year, which the last time that happened was back in 2008, and it's not anticipated for next year. An interest tax if Texas owes interest on a federal unemployment loan, and an obligation assessment tax if Texas needs to repay bonds that are issued to pay unemployment benefits. There's no intent to issue bonds, so obligation assessment tax and surplus credit tax are in all likelihood off the table. The effective unemployment tax rate, your bottom line tax rate that you apply to the first $9,000 of each employee's earnings in a calendar year, that's the result of all of those factors added together. Now, the replenishment tax and the replenishment ratio are very significant because the way the legislature has designed our system, if there is a shortfall in the unemployment insurance trust fund in Texas, that's the fund out of which benefits are paid, half of it is recovered through the replenishment tax. The other half is recovered through the replenishment ratio. So if you want to see the tax rate calculation formula in detail, it's at that web address that you see in the bottom item on this slide. And it's a very well written and easy to understand page there, so I would recommend it for anybody who's curious. Each year, TWC publishes the next year's unemployment insurance tax rates. That happens in early December. So in general terms, we're still a little bit uncertain about exactly when the tax rate notices will go out this year, but in traditional terms, they go out after the first week of December. Now that 3-year look back period that I talked about earlier, that ends on September 30th of each year. In October, the tax department gets all the wage and chargeback information together that the calculations require. In November, the month we're in now, the tax department carries out those calculations and the tax department shares the aggregate information with the commission. And then once all of the tax rates are finally calculated, the tax rate notices go out to employers. Usually that happens between the first and second weeks of December on a form that is Form C-22. Any determination of the tax department, that's the tax rate, the status of workers, what happens with a business acquisition, and other tax issues like penalties for late wage reporting or late tax payments, may be appealed to the Commission via a special rule. That's Rule 815.113. You can find out about the tax appeal process at the web address that is in that middle item. If you appeal a tax department determination, the commissioners themselves, the 3 commissioners in Austin, will make the final decision on that appeal. Final notes, anybody who's interested in webinar recordings and presentation materials, I'd like to remind you that they will be posted on the TWC website as soon as technically possible. We're still working through some technical issues, but keep checking the Lunchtime Live webinar page on our website for updates on the links for downloading. As soon as links are available, they will be posted there. There are 2 more Lunchtime Live webinars scheduled for this year, December 3rd and December 17th, with different topics and some different speakers, a couple of whom will be very good employment law attorneys from private law firms. So that should be a real pleasure to see, and very valuable information. So I'd like to encourage everyone to register. Now, we have a little bit of time, and I was asked to address some questions that came in that are of a miscellaneous nature, not already covered by the speakers so far. Real quickly, stress in a workplace seems to be trending, especially among veterans. How can you balance the hardship to the workplace when the veteran absences are chronic and they claim stress to COVID? So the best source of information on that would be our Texas Veterans Leadership Program. It's part of the TWC in our Workforce Development Division. Just get on our webpage at twc.texas.gov and look for the Texas Veterans Leadership Program. They have all kinds of good resources for employers who are looking to hire veterans or who have veterans on their workforce and they're wanting to help them be more effective. Next question, are employers required to pay furloughed employees health benefits? The answer is no, but you need to make sure if they lose eligibility for your company group health plan, make sure that you give them notice of their COBRA rights under either Texas or federal law, depending upon the size of your company. It'll be state law if they have between, if your company has between 2 and 20 employees. It'll be federal law if you have 20 or more employees, but give them notice of their benefit continuation rights under COBRA laws. I am considering giving a bonus for perfect attendance. It would be a written policy given to staff. Is this legal? Well, that could be tricky, especially if it's done in a way that fails to take into consideration both the laws requiring employers to give employees time off for certain legally protected purposes like voting and serving on juries or serving as witnesses or doing military duty. And also if it fails to take into consideration reasonable accommodation issues under the ADA. So you would want to look on the EEOC website at eeoc.gov and look at their guidance for reasonable accommodation for small businesses on their website. It's very excellent and very well-written guidance on the EEOC website. If you have trouble finding it, please just send us an email and we'll be glad to send you the link. How do businesses qualify for skills development funds for employees who need better skills and to do apprenticeship or career training? Anything like that can be worked out through the local workforce solutions offices, and we've got a statewide directory of local workforce solutions centers on our website. So just look for the local office directory on our website. If you can't find it, let us know via email and we'll send you a link. Final question. I'm looking to learn more about growing my business-to-business sales. At a particular company, mattress company, for each bed purchased from us, we donate a bed to different charities that are in need of beds. If someone buys 100 beds, we donate 100 beds, and they would like some information on how to increase the business and find more opportunities to, let everybody benefit that way. We don't have information directly on that, but the governor's small business office would definitely have some handy information on business-to-business opportunities and best practices and strategies. So look on the governor's website at gov.texas.gov, and you will find the small business office. And if you can't find the link to the small business information, send us an email and we'll be glad to send you a link. That's all that the questions that we have time for, unfortunately, but I'd like to remind everybody about the upcoming webinars on December 3rd and December 17th. And after this webinar, if you have any questions, please don't be shy. Commissioner Demerson wants you to feel free to contact his office on any of these questions. So let us know. And thank you all very much for your attendance today. Have a good rest of the Thursday. Bye-bye.